Hello, everyone. Well, we have a very interesting topic today, bioidentical hormones. I'll tell you, I don't understand anything, so I'm going to have Dr. Fenske, who's joining me live here. She is double board certified OBGYN and integrative medicine to talk about what we should do and what the medical world says. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today. So it's such a great topic and such a timely topic right now. It's an incredibly confusing area to go into. And I think it's always important to kind of first and foremost understand a little bit about where things went awry in the hormone discussion. And then I do want to kind of talk about some of the terminology that's used when we talk about hormones. And as we're all quite familiar with, but in 2002, there was the Women's Health Initiative study that was published. Prior to that, it was pretty commonplace for women to be on hormone replacement therapy. So starting in the 60s and the 70s, women were all basically on hormone replacement therapy. It was kind of for lack of a better way of saying it, the standard of care, right, for medicine was that once you went to menopause, you were put on hormone replacement therapy. Unfortunately, initially, it was done wrong. It was done where women were just put on estrogen, thinking that estrogen's the only hormone that was needed. Unfortunately, because of this, there was a rise in uterine cancer, because when estrogen exists without the presence of progesterone, which is kind of that great balancing hormone, then there's an increased risk of what we say is proliferation or growth of tissue inside the uterus, which put women more at risk for uterine cancer. So then at that point, progesterone was, and technically actually was progestin, which I'll go into terminology, was introduced to the mix, and women were put on estrogen and progestin. There was a lot of observational studies that were done showing kind of the benefits of hormone replacement therapy, and that it's cardioprotective and decreased the risk of heart disease, decreased the risk of osteoporosis. And then it was finally decided that a randomized controlled trial should be used, because in science, those are the gold standard studies. The best studies are ones that are randomized, meaning that the women, or in this case women, but subjects are not knowledgeable about whether they're receiving the medication or not receiving the medication. And the what we call investigators, or the people who are organizing the study, don't know if who's on the medication, who's not on the medication. So these randomized control trial was done, which was the Women's Health Initiative. And it was, 27,000 women were involved in the study. And what had happened was that the study was actually terminated early because of this increased risk of breast cancer. And that was, very alarming. And at that point and on, physicians and gynecologists just didn't feel comfortable prescribing hormones anymore. And in understanding that, there were a few issues with the study, and that could be, an hour conversation in and of itself, but we'll just kind of touch on a few issues that were raised in the study. The study did not use bioidentical hormones. The study used synthetic hormones. And when we say bioidentical, we mean hormones that are the exact same chemical structure as the hormones that our bodies produce. And when we say synthetic, we mean that there's a different chemical structure to them. But that they ideally, act in a similar way as the natural hormones do. So the study used synthetic hormones because that was actually what was commonly used at that time. And they used conjugated equine estrogen, which is actually estrogen that's collected from pregnant horse urine. And they used MPA, which is a synthetic progestin. So not progesterone, it's a synthetic progestin. What they had found was that there was this increased risk of breast cancer. That being said, the average age of the woman in the study was 63, which is in the US 12 years past the average age of menopause. So long after menopause, where you're no longer making those hormones, these synthetic hormones are being introduced into the body. And the other issue was kind of the understanding of what like an absolute risk is versus a relative risk. So in the arm of the study that had, what we say is placebo, right? No hormones were actually used. 4 out of 1,000 women had a diagnosis of breast cancer. And in the arm of the study that used the hormones, 5 out of 1,000 women had a diagnosis of breast cancer. So the issue being that they quoted this, and this is what went to media, as a 25% increased risk of breast cancer if you take hormone replacement therapy. And that is kind of a relative risk, but the absolute risk is an additional 1 per 1,000. They actually had an arm of the study where they were just on estrogen only, and there was no increased risk of breast cancer in those studies. So a lot of questions were brought to light, which were never really addressed because of the fear that came with this study. But was it the progestin, that synthetic progesterone that had been used in the study, which was NPA? Was that potentially the reason why there was an increased risk of breast cancer? And so for the past 20-ish years, right, the pendulum had swung in the complete opposite direction and hormones weren't used. And now we're sort of realizing that there are still those benefits that we had seen actually in that study too, where there was a decreased risk of heart disease. There was a decreased risk of osteoporosis. Obviously, it helped treat women's what we call vasomotor symptoms, right? Those hot flashes, those night sweats, those symptoms of perimenopause and menopause. And a slight decreased risk of colon cancer too was seen. And data has come out subsequent to that looking at, is it protective to the brain and decreases the risk of dementia if you're on hormones, if started in the right time. So some key factors in really understanding hormone replacement therapy is understanding the terminology. So bioidentical, again, same chemical structure as the estrogen and progesterone that your body produces. And understanding timing, right? So if you are someone who's interested in being on hormone replacement therapy, it can be beneficial in some respects as long as it started within 10 years of menopause. But we know if you start hormones more than 10 years after menopause, now there's been all this restructuring in the vessels in the body, and now it actually can become dangerous to start hormones that far out from menopause. So timing is really crucial. What I think is really important is that regardless of whether you're someone who wants to have hormones or not, you need to have the conversation, right? And what I always say is that it's kind of like as you go through puberty, right? Your mother has that conversation with you about puberty. And once you become sexually active or plan to be sexually active, there's that conversation that's had about sex. We get it. We even get that education in school, right? Growing up. And there needs to be the same thing that as you're someone who's approaching perimenopause, right? That conversation should happen before menopause. So in that perimenopausal time period, you want to at least have an educated conversation with your physician about hormone replacement therapy, see if it's something that you would want to do, and see if it's, helpful to your body or harmful to your body. And every physician should have that conversation with their patient during that time period in their life.
I think you bring up very important point, is that most of the women don't have a conversation because they don't know what to ask, right? So that's the problem. At least in the United States, I talked to a lot of women or experts coming from UK that they've done an amazing job in educating and awareness of menopause. But I think the rest of the world is still kind of waking up to what is it that we need to start talking about, right? And I mean, do you see women in your practice coming, oh, I'm going through perimenopause, tell me what to do? I mean,
I'm seeing more of that lately,
okay.
but I think that's because more of the media focus that's now come into light with perimenopause and menopause. So they're knowing to kind of ask those questions. And, it's important that if hormones are not something that you feel comfortable with in your body, that's fine. There are alternative options. There are management for your symptoms. The most important thing is that there's no need to suffer during this time period. It is a natural portion of life, but it doesn't have to be one that we suffer through.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Well, that's why professionals like you are trying to pave the way for women out there. So please feel free to share your company, what you're trying to do before we wrap up.
Yeah, my pleasure. So my company is Tara MD, and that's www.taramd.com. But if you're, not in the United States or in my area, then another way of looking and trying to find somebody across, kind of North America and trying to find a menopause provider is going to menopause.org. And you can actually put in your zip code, your area code. You can expand your your search profile, and you can find somebody who actually has a specialized education in menopause. Because unfortunately, in medical school and in residency, we're just not given that education because of what had happened.
Yeah, and that's what is a little bit alarming, right? Medical schools don't talk about this subject, and now we are, thanks to you and other professionals like yourself, that we are talking about it, and more people, women will know about what to do, right?
That's the hope, right?
That's what we are here for, both of us. Well, thank you so much. I know you're a very busy MD, so I'm so grateful and in gratitude that for you to take few minutes for us and help us make this topic awareness more to millions of other women out there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a great day.